The war in Gaza often feels like it's locked in this devastating, endless cycle of violence and political deadlock. But why can't it stop? In this explainer, we're going to break down the human cost, the stalled negotiations, and the massive challenges that lie ahead, so we can really understand what's happening on the ground and what the future might even look like.
So let's just start with one single number to try and wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this crisis. 1.9 million. According to UNICEF, that's how many people have been displaced in Gaza. That's nearly the entire population, forced from their homes into this constant state of danger and uncertainty.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with the human catastrophe, then dig into why a ceasefire is so hard to reach. After that, we'll look at the fighting itself, what a modern guerrilla war looks like, and the unbelievable challenge of rebuilding. And finally, we'll ask that huge question, what comes next?
To really get what's going on, we have to start with the people on the ground. And we're not just talking about damage here. We're talking about the total collapse of the systems that people need to survive.
The human cost is just devastating. Public health reviews show the death toll has climbed past 50,000, but when you look closer, the details are even more harrowing. Almost a third of those killed are children. And just look at the toll on critical personnel. Over 1,500 medical staff, more than 200 journalists. This isn't just the loss of life. It's the loss of the very people a society needs to function, to heal, and to recover.
And the destruction, it goes so much deeper than individual casualties. We're talking about the pillars of society just crumbling. Famine has been officially declared. Over 60% of all health infrastructure, gone. And, as the Brookings Institution reports, nearly 9 out of every 10 schools are damaged. That's an entire generation's education just stopped in its tracks. This quote from UNICEF, it really puts the food crisis into stark perspective. This isn't some natural disaster. It's a direct result of the conflict. That phrase, man-made disaster, is such a powerful way of saying how dire things have gotten for the most vulnerable people.
So you see this devastating human cost, and it just begs the question, right? With so much suffering, why can't the fighting stop? Well, the answer really lies in a deep political deadlock.
And this is the core of it. A deal can't be reached because the two main sides have fundamentally different and maybe totally irreconcilable ideas about what the end looks like. So this right here, this lays out the huge gap between them. Israel is willing to talk about a sustainable calm, but has called a permanent ceasefire a non-starter. Hamas, on the other hand, is demanding a permanent truce and a complete withdrawal before all the hostages are released. The key difference is this. One side is talking about a pause, while the other is demanding a final, complete end to the war. They're not even on the same page.
And you know, internal politics just adds another really complex layer. According to U.S. officials, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is worried that a permanent ceasefire could make his right-wing coalition collapse, which would cost him his job. For any leader, that's a big deal. But for a leader who's also facing an ongoing corruption trial, losing power has huge personal and political stakes, and you have to assume that influences the calculations here.
So, with no political solution anywhere in sight, the fighting just continues. But what does it actually look like on the ground? Well, this isn't a conventional war. It's an asymmetrical conflict, and it's being defined by guerrilla tactics. Academic analyses of the conflict basically describe it as a classic case of guerrilla warfare. This isn't about two armies lining up on an open battlefield. It's about a less powerful force using its knowledge of the terrain and using unconventional methods to fight back against a much more technologically advanced military. And the key to this whole strategy is the massive tunnel network under Gaza. Military reports describe this really consistent pattern. Hamas fighters pop up from hidden shafts, they launch their attacks, often with anti-tank missiles, and then they just melt away, back into the tunnels. This kind of hit-and-run approach makes it incredibly hard for a conventional army to fight them head-on.
So how effective has Israel's military operation been against this network? Well, according to some reports, even with all the intensive efforts, only about a quarter, just 25%, of Hamas's tunnel system has been destroyed. That really highlights what a huge challenge it is to fight an enemy with such a deep and resilient infrastructure.
So you see, the goal here isn't just about inflicting physical damage. It's also psychological. By creating this constant unseen threat, these tactics are designed to wear down the morale of the opposing soldiers over a long period of time. It creates a state of anxiety that can really degrade the effectiveness of a much stronger force.
Now let's say if and when the fighting finally stops. What happens next? The task of rebuilding Gaza is just staggering. It's almost unimaginable in its scale and its complexity.
The sheer scale of the destruction is it's hard to wrap your mind around.
We're talking about almost 90% of schools damaged, over 60% of health infrastructure completely destroyed. The very fabric of civilian life has been ripped to shreds.
And this brings us to the two enormous, unanswered questions that hang over any conversation about the future. Who is going to govern Gaza, and who is going to pay the billions and billions of dollars needed to rebuild it? Without answers to those, any reconstruction plan is really just a fantasy.
The obstacles are just immense. As analysts from Brookings and Relief Web point out, international donors are, understandably, hesitant to fund massive projects that could just get destroyed again in the next conflict. There's also this huge governance vacuum. Nobody agrees on who will be in charge of a post-war Gaza. And the Palestinian Authority, which might be a candidate, simply doesn't have the resources to take on something this massive.
So all of this, it leads to a future that is just deeply, deeply uncertain. The crisis right now is overwhelming, but the questions about the long term are just as daunting.
This quote from Relief Web, it really captures the heart of the problem. This is not the first time Gaza has needed to be rebuilt. The tragedy is that this has become a devastating, repeating cycle. The real challenge isn't just about laying bricks, it's about breaking this pattern for good.
And so, we're left with the one question that defines everything. It goes way beyond a ceasefire, way beyond rebuilding. What will it actually take to create a political and a social foundation that's strong enough to finally break this cycle of destruction so that the next generation doesn't have to live through this all over again? That, right there, remains the most profound challenge of all.